Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, August 12th, 2025 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, recording today from Jacksonville, Florida. And this episode is brought to you by the SANS.edu Credit Certificate Program in Cyber Defense Operations. Well, ahead of Patch Tuesday, I do want to take a little bit of a different spin here and talk about a couple vulnerabilities that became known as being exploited the last couple days. All of these vulnerabilities have patches available, so these are not strictly speaking 0 days, but still some of these patches are relatively new. The first one here is the vulnerability in the Erlang OTP variant of SSH. OTP here stands for Open Telecom Platform, and that's where you often find this version of SSH. There's a number of Cisco devices that run Erlang OTP SSH. So those are the kind of devices where you have to be careful and that you must patch. When I talked about the patch and the vulnerability as it was released, the exploit is actually relatively straightforward, so no big surprise that it is being exploited in the wild. And Palo Alto here collected some of the evidence that they found and how it is being exploited in the wild right now. So definitely something that you must patch now. And if you have devices that are exposed that are using this version of SSH, well, please make sure that you are also checking them for any existing compromise. Rotate password, rotate any seeds for two-factor authentication. Well, another already exploited vulnerability is a vulnerability in WinRAR before version 7.12. This vulnerability was patched end of June, and it's one of those classic decompression vulnerabilities where an attacker can create an archive that once it's being decompressed or extracted, it creates files in unexpected locations. By creatively selecting these locations, an attacker is able to then potentially execute arbitrary code. Update WinRAR, but this is one of those tricky ones where WinRAR, also some of the components, DLLs, may be embedded, may be included in other software. So definitely inventory can be a bit of a challenge here. And the Dutch National Cybersecurity Center has released some updates regarding a Citrix vulnerability. It was also patched end of June, but actually had been exploited before the patch was released. This is your classic Citrix Netscaler issue. What they are pointing out here again is that attackers that are attacking this vulnerability are actively hiding their tracks. So you have to be really careful here to actually evict the attackers permanently from your systems. Remember all of the issues we had recently with some of the firewall compromise and such, where it wasn't really clear if it was a new vulnerability or just sort of backdoors or stolen credentials left behind from an old vulnerability. That's also why I earlier mentioned about the SH vulnerability, always change credentials, change seeds for one-time factor or one-time passwords and two-factor authentication. And definitely assume the system has been compromised if you see a vulnerable exposed system and the vulnerability has been known for a while or has known to be exploited for a while. And OpenSSH is doubling down on pushing post-quantum cryptography. Current versions of OpenSSH in use are usually 9.6, 9.9. Nothing wrong with these versions. They actually do support at least 9.9 already, quantum-safe encryption algorithms, but they are doing so as an option, not by default. Starting with OpenSSH 10, which I don't think is in any sort of major Linux distribution as such yet. These post-quantum cryptography algorithms have become the default, and in 10.1, which is just being released, it now will warn you if you're using an algorithm that is not yet quantum safe. So this is an interesting push here by the OpenSSH project. They always have been a little bit sort of trying to be at the forefront of good crypto practices, and nothing wrong with this. Just if you're seeing the warning, it may not be possible for you to actually apply these algorithms if the server you're connecting to does not support them. And that depends, of course, on the version of OpenSSH running there. IoT devices and the like are often behind on SSH versions, and there can sometimes be challenging, and you may have to set up some exceptions where you're still using some weaker ciphers and key exchanges. Well, and this is it for today. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for liking and subscribing to this podcast, and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.